Welcome back to our discussion, How Intelligent Automation and AI Are Transforming Government, sponsored by KPMG. I'm Tom Temin on Federal News Radio, part of the Federal News Network. My guest today is Kirk Everson, Principal and Government Intelligent Automation Leader at KPMG. And Kirk, let's get into some of the nitty-gritty of this RPA and AI whole complex. And I think one of the big challenges, and you've pointed out, is the workforce that is going to design and carry out and operate these systems. What are some of the challenges there?
So as I mentioned before, the human and machine interaction is becoming more and more prevalent as we start to introduce these AI technologies. There's also, and you've heard it before on many forums, in my opinion, unsubstantiated fears of these technologies negatively impacting the workforce. And it's funny, we just did a survey globally, and it found that senior executives are implementing AI for the reasons not related to workforce reduction. In fact, 1% said we're doing this for cost savings purposes. The majority of what we're seeing is excitement around these technologies, and so agencies are standing up these communities of practice around these types of tools and techniques and capabilities to create that buzz, to create that excitement, and to inspire their employees to come up with these use cases that would make their jobs more meaningful for them. So I think it's extremely important that we remember that the workforce is the genesis of these use cases, and the workforce is going to be the ones that are actually implementing these technologies. And so I think as we think technology, we think bits and bytes, but it's really all about how the humans, again, will interface with these new technologies.
In many ways, this is an evolution of the automation that has been happening in offices ever since, I remember when the first PCs deployed, you had to put in 5 1/4-inch floppy disks. Nobody has to do that anymore. Maybe in the government somewhere. But this is just another step in the long evolution of people reacting with machines. And so training would seem to be kind of a big part of this if you're going to have success.
I think it's a couple things. It's training not only how to do their jobs with these new technologies, but it's also upskilling to better arm our workforce with the new tools and techniques to be able to then implement on their own. I mean, things like RPA, you can build your own automations at the attended desktop level in a matter of hours, if not minutes, for simpler processes. So yeah, I mean, I mentioned this before, where my children are used to talking at appliances and swiping things when you and I were hitting play on our Walkman. So I think it's looking at how we increase the ways in which we interface with technology and how we upskill our workforce to be able to enable those tools.
And what about the IT workforce? And there's two issues there. One, they might need to be, I guess, comfortable with the automation of back office IT routines that they might have done manually, moving workloads around or whatever. Nobody puts in disk packs anymore either, for that matter. And also the people that program this. It's a whole new world for them too in some ways.
It is, and I think one of the lessons learned that I'll say now is you really need to have IT at the table with you to be able to support your vision. Because again, you want to have that business or mission objective in mind to be able to accomplish a certain goal and allow technology to get you there. But it's important to have that partnership with IT to enable you from an infrastructure perspective, from a technology perspective. But also, they have their own use cases that they want to apply. I mean, one example, it's very tedious to, from a cyber perspective, to recertify access control lists. Someone is literally, looking at access control lists, comparing it to an HR separation list. Well, why not create an automation to do that, in real time, especially for smaller organizations that can't afford these enterprise cybersecurity platforms.
And what about areas like cybersecurity, automation, cloud computing, CDM, all of these initiatives and policies for the federal government that have a lot of tasks? It sounds like they could be automated also.
Definitely, and I think there's no shortage of data in the federal government, right? And I think if you can't apply these tools, you're going to be drowning in data. You're going to have a really hard time implementing things like CDM, continuous monitoring, continuous evaluation, looking at the workforce to make sure you have that trusted workforce. So I think it's important that we're not implementing these technologies because it's cool. We're implementing them out of necessity because of the fact that we can't throw enough humans at this data to be able to parse through it and really get actionable outcomes.
Sure. And what about the governance of all of this? If you have these robotic processes running all over the place, I imagine there are some real issues for the agency to deal with to make sure everything is done properly according to statute and regulation. And is policy up to the technology in this particular field?
Yeah, I think governance is a fairly all-encompassing term that talks about decision making in the agency, and dimensions of that include things like security and policy. A lot of agencies are taking a second look at how they manage their security. Historically, I wouldn't think to give access to some type of thing called a bot or an algorithm without some type of human in the loop. And so now we're having to go back and look at, say, well, how do we authorize an automation to interface with a system that is used to having a CAC card or a PIV card? The bots don't have those. They don't walk around with a lanyard. So I think policy is playing a little bit of catch up to technology. But the governance aspect is extremely important because, as we implement these techniques, it's important to have that enterprise-wide oversight. A lot of agencies are getting started, which is great, but you're starting to see pockets of excellence, and you really want to make sure that you can leverage the lessons learned across the enterprise.
And sometimes things don't go according to how you planned. What about building in the auditability or, let's say, the rewind function, to use that phrase, for some of the algorithms and some of the automated processes? Is that something you should think about? Is it doable?
I think it's a must, and I think agencies, on the first meeting are talking about how is this secure, and I think vendors understand it, the service providers understand it. So a lot of these techniques and tools have audit logs built in. We've got a methodology called AI in Control that really puts a framework around making sure that the algorithms are initiated and instantiated in a secure and trusted manner. So I think it is important that security is at the table day one to make sure that these things are applied appropriately.
So that methodology, AI in Control, that's something, a framework, in other words.
Correct.
It's probably good to have a structured approach.
Correct.
To make sure that you have conformance to policy, whether it's in the back shop automation or deployment to the public.
Right, and I think it's important to remember that any type of framework or methodology needs to be tailored to the agency that you're working with. A lot of agencies are ahead of the game, and they're leveraging their existing SDLC and their security processes, but they're implementing data science techniques into actually those processes themselves, and so I think you want to make sure you can configure your governance and security in a way that also meets the needs of your agency's processes.
Yeah, it's an interesting problem because the security requirements writ large create logs and data, and yet the automation of handling them also creates logs and data of their own.
Right. Yeah, that's a great way to put it. They call it the data exhaust, right? When you've implemented new technologies, there's more data to contend with, and that's why I think as you start to think about governance, also think about, well, how can I leverage these new data sets, and what can I do with them, and how can I apply AI to those data sets? So it's a bit of a cycle, right? So having that data science application, having the ability to encompass the data from an infrastructure and cloud perspective is extremely important for these things to be successful.
Yeah, so that seems to mitigate in favor of having everybody involved from, say, the top of the agency to make sure that the policy is covered and those policies are meaningful. And yet at the same time, you need to have your tech people because they're the ones that are stewards of all of this output and, as you put it, data exhaust.
I think it's important that you, as you said, the top of the organization, you have that evangelist, that executive evangelist that can kind of carry the flag and support the effort from a governance perspective, but also from a strategy perspective. You shouldn't be implementing anything that doesn't align to the agency's strategy, right? I mean, it's great to have an R&D component to what you're doing, but ultimately you want to support that agency's strategy, and that's really where the workforce comes in to again, implore and implement some of these use cases that are going to have the highest impact.
All right, my guest today is Kirk Everson, Principal and Government Intelligence Automation Leader at KPMG. I'm your moderator, Tom Temin. This discussion is how intelligent automation and AI are transforming government, sponsored by KPMG here on Federal News Radio, part of the Federal News Network.